So now we're at the student enrollment annual report. So I'll hand it back to you.
All right. Thank you. Trustees, thank you for the opportunity to share with you and our community this evening the Fall 2023 Student Enrollment Report. I am honored to introduce Dr. Dan Berger, who will present the enrollment report this evening. As Dr. Berger walks us through the report this evening, trustees, you will see signs that our enrollment is stabilizing post-pandemic and that our district continues to serve a richly diverse student population, which is a significant point of pride for us here in the Ann Arbor Public Schools. So the report is rich with information that Dr. Berger will share and walk us through. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Berger.
Good evening, trustees. As we do every year around this time, tonight we'll present our annual fall enrollment report. If you go to slide 2, please. So we're going to look at some top-line numbers as well as breaking down our enrollment numbers by student demographics. And we'll take a look at student mobility and a bit more closely at some of our special programs. And just a reminder that enrollment is constantly a fluid thing. Everything we present here is keyed into one moment at Fall Count Day of 2023, which was October 4th this year. And every day we have students moving in and out of the district and to different places even within the district. So remember that this is all just one snapshot in time. So keep that in mind as we go through this. Slide 3 presents our top line enrollment numbers. As you can see here, we have 16,927 young 5 through 12th grade students enrolled in AAPS buildings and programs. And on top of that, we serve another 355 preschool students in various programs and capacities. So taken together, that gives us a total headcount number of 17,282 for this year. Slide 4 puts this number into perspective over time. As you can see in this graph, our enrollment numbers have changed less than 0.5% in each of the last 2 cycles, a drop of 34 or 0.2% two cycles ago, and this last cycle, just another small change of about 0.4%, so still less than 0.5% change. And so these numbers appear to be stabilizing post the onset of COVID and after the bubble that we had that came through that peaked in 2018. So we've had a drop the last 2 years together of less than 0.5% each year, and it's a total of 100 students. Remember that number because I'm going to come back to that number later for another purpose. But over the last 2 years, it's just been a small drop of 100. But we see a lot of stabilization happening here, at least in the last 2 years. So if this continues, we can see kind of some stabilization happening. Slide 5 presents this in a bit longer context, as well as in comparison to the state of Michigan as a whole. As you can see over a 20-year time frame, enrollment in Michigan, the red line, which is the red scale on the right-hand side also, has dropped 16.1% over about 20 years. And during that same time, Ann Arbor Public Schools enrollment has bounced around a little bit, but it's increased by 1.9% during that same time period. On the left of the screen, you can see we have a blow up of just the years, fall 2019, just before COVID-19 onset. And in the 4-year time frame from then until now, we see a similar, though slightly greater drop than the state as a whole. Michigan dropped 4.1% in that time frame, and Ann Arbor 5.3%. Slide 6 takes the same look, but this time comparing Ann Arbor Public Schools enrollment to Washtenaw County schools. The county has had a less pronounced drop than the state over about 20 years at 6.9% decrease, but our 1.9% increase during that time frame still compares positively. And again, on the left, if we look at just sort of the just before COVID to the most recent data we have from My School Data, we can see that in that 4-year time frame, the county as a whole had just over a 1% greater drop than Ann Arbor. They had 6.4%, and we had our 5.3% decrease during that same time frame. So as we've done in other years, slide 7 compares our young 5 and kindergarten enrollment to Washtenaw County birth rates plus 5 years. So what I've done here is I've pulled the Washtenaw County birth rates from Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, added 5 years to that when the students were 5 years old, and looked at our young 5 and kindergarten enrollment rates because that's when we would expect them to come in. And so you can see here that the Washtenaw County birth rates over the last 10 years has decreased by 7.7%, Coincidentally, our enrollment has increased by 7.7%. Can't make that up, folks. So it's 7.7 down, 7.7 up. So we're doing better than would necessarily be expected just based on the birth rates in the county. Slide 8 continues to break down our enrollment numbers in yet another way. And slide 8 looks at the numbers by level: elementary, middle, and high. And so you can see some small changes in counts between levels from last year to this year. Nothing really big. Generally, that usually is just different size classes moving through. For example, last year's graduating senior class just happened to be a larger class. They had about, I think it was 60 or 70 more students than this year's 12th grade class at fall count. And I know you get background documents that go along with this. There is a background document that it is called, let me get the right title, Enrollment History by Grade. It's the one I call the Crazy Rainbow Table. And you can look at that and kind of see where those numbers have moved up and down. But when I studied that, I didn't see anything particularly that stood out as anything abnormal. So that's that. Slide 9. We're going to move to some student demographic breakdowns. So this presents the race ethnicity breakdown of our student body. And please remember that all the race ethnicity data is self-reported. So it can change for any given student from one year to the next, in theory, when their parents fill out their enrollment application. But you can see here that in the last 4 years, we haven't had any really major shifts in any big shifts in our race ethnicity breakdown. We remain a non-white majority district. And you can see we've kind of around 14 to 15% African-American students in the last 4 years, about 1% Arab American, 14 to 13% Asian students, 2 or 3% Hispanic Latino students, 19 to 22% multi-ethnic, and 49% white students. Slide 10 shows this same race ethnicity still, but in this case, we're looking by level. And as we've seen in the last couple years, more students are identifying as multi-ethnic at the lower grade levels than at the upper grade levels. And this seems to be a trend that's gone through over the last couple years, where we have more elementary students who are saying multi-ethnic. So I don't know if that's a change in how people are identifying, or if that's an actual change in our student body. So, we'd have to do some more digging to determine that. And so continuing on with demographics for a moment, slide 11 looks at some of our specific demographic populations. Currently, about 13% of our students have IEPs, and 24% are impacted by poverty as measured by free and reduced price lunch eligibility. And 10% of our population are English learners currently. These are basically the same proportions as last year. I think the only difference is that impacted by poverty was 25% last year. But slide 12 looks at these same three groups of students on a longer time frame. And as you can see, over the past decade, our EL population, which is the blue line at the top, has grown from 6.7 to 9.9%. Our population of students with IEPs over about 10 years has grown from about 10.6 to about 12.8% of our population. And the population impacted by poverty has bounced around a little bit. And I don't see there's not a real clear pattern there, but it's all been in the 20 something range, like 22 to 27 or 28%, depending on the year. But no real clear trend on that over the decade. So moving on to another special population that we like to look at, slide 13 looks specifically at our Young 5 and kindergarten enrollments. So, this has been a project for the Ann Arbor Public Schools over a decade now, as we've provided more offerings for Young 5s and tried to serve more young children in our community. And this has really been a success. If you look at the graph and look at these numbers, over 10 years, our Young 5s and kindergarten enrollment has increased by 26.8%. As we've offered more and more Young 5 programming options, and we now have Young 5 program at a Young 5 program at every one of our elementary schools. We've achieved that in the last couple of years. So over the next several slides, we'll look at entries and exits between the end of the 22-23 academic year and fall count 2023. So slide 14 provides an overview of new students who've come into our district from grades 1 through 12. So this isn't including new kindergartners coming in who are just starting school, but these are new students who are coming in sometime after that. And so these are students in grades 1 through 12 who've entered the Ann Arbor Public Schools over time. Ann Arbor is a highly mobile community. We have a lot of people moving in and out for a lot of different reasons. So we have a fair number of both incoming and outgoing students each year. And most of these numbers on this particular table didn't stand out as outliers over time to me. We can see that the students coming in from out of country and out of state both continue back towards pre-COVID levels. There was sort of a dip there where there wasn't just as much, I think just people weren't moving around as much because of everything going on with COVID. So you can see if you look at the out of country and the out of state, those are both kind of like, they kind of cratered in 2020 and they've sort of been coming back up ever since. And I think that's just the mobility of people was stymied during the COVID pandemic. So slide 15 shows where students are coming to us from within the county. So students who already lived in our, I'm sorry, not within the county, but within our population area, our attendance area. And this is showing where they came from. You can see it's a mix of different kinds of schools, 15 from charter schools, 48 from parochial religious schools, 100 from other private non-public schools, 24 from homeschool or online or other sort of like programs where they were not in a physical building regularly. And then 3 that we had that it wasn't well labeled in the data. So I just listed those as unknown. So they're coming from a lot of different places. And slide 17 looks specifically, slide 16, details those coming from outside of our attendance area, from inside the county and from outside of the county. The outside of the county numbers were already on the table 2 slides ago. You can see on the inside the county, we have people coming from all different of the different districts in the county, although it seems like there's a few more coming in from Lincoln and Ypsilanti than from some of the other places. Slide 17 looks specifically at a special, particular group of students, our schools of choice students. And these are broken into 2 categories in this table. First, we have new school of choice students who are entering Ann Arbor Public Schools through the Schools of Choice program for the first time. And then the second row are students who were previously enrolled in Ann Arbor Public Schools, but moved out of the district and applied for schools of choice to stay with us. So that's what these 2 different groupings are. And then, of course, the total is at the bottom. You can see that. So if you look at the total number of schools of choice students that have been taken in the last couple of years, you can see that Ann Arbor Public Schools has decided to open up fewer SOC spots in the last few years. And, there are reasons to open spots. There are reasons not to open spots. But that probably is actually the most direct lever that we have to impact our enrollment numbers. So if you look at from 2021 to 2023, you'll see that we took a total of 100 less SOC students over those 2 years. I'll call back to many slides ago, and I said, remember that number 100? We dropped 100 students total during that same time period. So, obviously, this isn't a precise one-to-one correspondence, but it does illustrate how decisions around opening SOC spots can directly impact our overall enrollment. So, slide 18 paints a picture of our overall schools of choice enrollment, not just the new students this year, which were on the last slide. As you can see, we're at about 10.3% school of choice students and 89.7% resident and non-child resident of employee students. This SOC percentage is down 0.7% from last year. Last year it was an even 11% schools of choice. This year it's 10.3%. So we spent some time looking at arrivals. Slide 19 looks at departures. As with arrivals, as I look at where people went this year compared to other years, nothing really stood out as abnormal that I'd like to draw real attention to. We have a mobile population, a number of students move in and out. If anything, our overall number of departures is a bit lower still than pre-COVID norms. Although it's pretty even in and out. If you recall on several slides ago, the total number out was 1034 and the total number in, or this number is 1034 and the total number in was 1028. So it was very, very similar, the number that just kind of like moved in and out. And that's just the mobility of our community. Slide 20 starts a run of slides that look at some of the special programs. We see here that the WEOC programs still serve a couple hundred of our students in total, and for whom those are good fit options. Slide 21 shows that our virtual courses still provide a set of options for Ann Arbor Public School students, and they have a pretty robust uptake. Just a little over 5% of all students participate in some level of virtual course taking. See 900 total. Slide 22 presents enrollment in our IB program schools, which in all three of these schools, you can see it ramped up when the program started and has remained strong ever since. And slide 23 shows similarly that same type of enrollment strength for the A2 STEAM model. Again, the enrollment was lower. It ramped up when that program started and has remained strong ever since. Slide 24 is kind of a list of takeaways. I've mentioned these throughout, so I won't belabor all the points here. But a couple of big takeaways is that, number one, we're seeing stability in our enrollment numbers. And taking the long view, we've showed modest growth over time, while the county and state have shown larger percentages of enrollment decreases, while we've had some modest growth over a 20-year time frame. And number two, we continue to serve a diverse and diversifying student population in a fairly high mobility community. Our work to create new and unique offerings has led to strong enrollment in those programs. And when we serve more of the community, for example, through increasing our Young 5 programs, bringing in more schools of choice spots, that's strengthened our overall enrollment numbers whenever we've done those special programs. So thank you for your time and attention.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.